What's up, everybody? It's JT Sports Max, you guys, with another video. In this video, I'm going to be previewing the Carolina Panthers halfbacks for the 2019 NFL season. I'm going to be going through all of the halfbacks that they currently have on their roster. Now, before I begin, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I upload NFL videos and NFL content daily. I also live stream every Sunday afternoon at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So it's a live call-in show when people call in, and we just talk about and conversate about the stuff that's going on in the NFL, and it's a lot of fun. So make sure that you guys subscribe to the channel if you're a fan of things like that. So the Carolina Panthers, their halfback core, it's pretty interesting because they have a lot of halfbacks who I really like, but I don't think they're gonna go into the season with a lot of these halfbacks. So it's gonna be pretty interesting to see the halfbacks that they end up keeping and the halfbacks that they end up letting go. And they have a lot of guys who I'm really, really high on. So first guy they have is Cameron Artis Payne. I'm not really that high on Cameron Artis Payne, to be honest. 2018 had 69 rushing yards, averaged 3.6 yards per carry, had one touchdown. Didn't really get in that much until like the last game of the season, I believe. So I'm not really that high on Cameron Artis Payne, to be honest. And I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up getting let go. But if he does stay on the roster, it'll probably be because he's a veteran and knows the playbook. But I don't really know how I feel about Artis Payne. A lot of Carolina Panthers fans got mad because when I did my wide receiver preview, they wanted me, I guess, to say the wide receivers who I thought was going to make the roster or not. So I guess I'll do that for this video. But to be honest, if I was the general manager or head coach of the Carolina Panthers, I wouldn't keep Cameron Artis Payne just because he doesn't really fit the skill set for the Carolina Panthers because they got Chris McCaffrey, a very talented running back that can do it all. So I think you probably want a guy who can complement Chris McCaffrey, who could basically do the similar things that he can do. And Cameron Artis Payne doesn't really do that, and he didn't really get in that much last season. So that just goes to show you. So I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up getting released. I'm not saying he's going to get released. I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up not making the roster. But if he did, it'll probably be because of the veteran experience that he has and having a long run with the roster and knowing the playbook. Next up, we have Chris McCaffrey. In 2018, had 1,098 rushing yards, 7 rushing touchdowns, was averaging 5 yards per carry, had 867 receiving yards, 107 receptions, and 6 receiving touchdowns. Now, a couple years ago, right? Back in the draft, I believe it was 2017. Was it 2017? Yeah, I think it was 2017. So I told everybody that the best running back in that class was Chris McCaffrey. And a lot of people say Leonard Fournette because Leonard Fournette has the size. Chris McCaffrey is going to last that long in the NFL because he doesn't have the size to keep with all the hits and stuff. He can't run in between the tackles. He's too finesse, this and that. And I told everybody that was a lot of baloney because this is why I hate the NFL Combine. People only look at size, they only look at how fast somebody could run. And Leonard Fournette was a great example of that. Just because Leonard Fournette had this freakish athleticism and had this crazy size and ran this great 40 time for his size, I think it's so overrated because I said that Chris McCaffrey was going to end up being the best halfback in that class. And he was going to end up being better than Leonard Fournette. A lot of people looked at me crazy, and I said Chris McCaffrey, he's going to be the guy who doesn't miss a lot of games. Leonard Fournette is going to be that guy missing a lot of games because when you have that much weight, your career, when you look at halfbacks who have been that big and have that kind of athleticism like a Leonard Fournette, they don't last long because all that weight, they end up suffering a lot of lower body injuries. And so far, I have been right. I say Chris McCaffrey is going to be the best halfback in that class, and he has been the best halfback in that class so far. And Leonard Fournette, I say he was going to be a halfback who's going to be able to be a very solid halfback when healthy, but we're not going to be able to chance to see that because he's not going to be able to stay healthy. And so far, I have been proved right. Leonard Fournette, so far in his career, has been suffering a lot of injuries, missed a lot of games last season for the Jacksonville Jaguars, the majority of the season last year for the Jaguars. And Chris McCaffrey has been very healthy, and he's on his way to being one of the best halfbacks in the NFL just because he can do more. And that was another reason I said Christian McCaffrey is better than Leonard Fournette because he can do more. In this day and age of the NFL, you just don't want a one trick pony at that halfback position. You want a halfback who can do it all, like an Alvin Kamara or a Christian McCaffrey. These guys can do it all. They can run. They're very good receiving backs as well. And Leonard Fournette, the Jacksonville Jaguars, that's actually something that they're trying to work on with Leonard Fournette is improving his pass catching skills other than his durability. Because that's another thing that Jacksonville Jaguars want Leonard Fournette to work on as well. So Chris McCaffrey, without a doubt, is on his way to being one of the best halfbacks in the NFL. I really like Chris McCaffrey a lot. And a couple of years ago, back in that draft, I told everybody that Chris McCaffrey was going to be the best halfback, and everybody looked at me crazy because they were like, "How do you think he's going to be better than Leonard Fournette? This guy is 200 and something freaking pounds and is running a 4.4 whatever." Dude, I I hate how draft time people only draft players because of their size. If the Jacksonville Jaguars actually had a chance to redo that draft, I bet you they would take Christian McCaffrey again over Leonard Fournette. Just because Leonard Fournette was only drafted to the Jacksonville Jaguars because he fit their scheme. They wanted to have a power run scheme. They wanted to have a guy who they can give the ball and he can give you about 6, 7 yards per carry. Pretty much they wanted a bulldozer at that halfback position. That's why Leonard Fournette got drafted by the Jacksonville Jaguars. But I mean, pretty much, I think the Jacksonville Jaguars had a chance to redo things. They will end up taking Chris McCaffrey just because I'd rather have a guy who can do several other things versus a guy who's a one trick pony who can just run down the field and run everybody over. I think guys like a Leonard Fournette don't really last that long in the NFL. We're already seeing it with Leonard Fournette. So next up, we have Elijah Holyfield. Now, Elijah Holyfield disappointed a lot of people during the combine process because his 40 time was absolutely abysmal. If his 40 time was a lot better, then he most definitely would have got drafted. This guy is a pinball machine. I love watching him at Georgia because this guy is just so exciting to watch. He just runs everybody over, just knocking people over left to right. Is I loved watching Elijah Holyfield. So when he ran that poor 40 time that he ran at the NFL Combine, I already knew most likely that he was not going to get drafted. And it was pretty much disappointing. So I think the Carolina Panthers got a steal here. Now Elijah Holyfield, he's not a guy who necessarily is going to have that Chris McCaffrey like a fate. Not a guy who's really going to do a lot of things, catching the ball out the backfield, but he does have okay hands, not great hands, but they're all right. They can use a lot of improvement, but I think Elijah Holyfield should be able to make this roster because this guy is the absolute pinball machine, and I think this guy, every time this guy runs the ball, people are bouncing off this guy. We're going to see a lot of him in the preseason. I think he's going to have a pretty good preseason, and if he does that, then I think he has a good chance of making the Carolina Panthers roster. Next up, we have Elijah Hood. Now, Elijah Hood, this is a guy who I couldn't really find a lot of information about. He spent last season on injured reserve after suffering a torn anterior ligament on the opening kickoff of the preseason finale. And the Carolina Panthers ended up signing him in May after the Oakland Raiders, who selected him in the seventh round of the 2017 NFL Draft, released him. Elijah Hood, I couldn't really find a lot of tape on this guy, but the few tape I was a little bit impressed. But still, I don't know if he's going to have a good shot at making this roster or not. If he makes his roster, it'll probably be strictly off special teams. But I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up not making the 53-man roster as well and probably being put on the practice squad. So next up, we have Jordan Scarlett. Now, Jordan Scarlett was drafted by the Carolina Panthers in the fifth round of this year's draft. Out of the University of Florida, he's a very strong and physical rhythm runner. He's a guy who runs with a rhythm and makes very good cuts and has very good explosion when he makes those cuts. And also has very good feet and runs through tacklers as well. So he's not really that much good of as a receiving threat like Elijah Holyfield. Him and Elijah Holyfield, when it comes to that department, they're very physical runners. But when it comes to receiving and doing things in the receiving game, they're not really going to do that much. But these guys are very powerful backs, very big, very physical. This guy had extremely large arms. I actually met this guy a couple of years ago and at a Florida game. So this guy has extremely big arms, and he's a very physical runner. He had a lot of off the field issues at Florida. He had a misdemeanor charge and a couple of other things as well. So I think Jordan Scarlett, he most definitely will make the roster, I believe, and I think he's going to have a little bit of an impact for the Carolina Panthers this season in 2019. The next guy that we have on this list is my favorite. This is a guy who I know for sure should most definitely make the roster. And if he doesn't make the roster, I would be extremely surprised. Reggie Bonnafon. Now, this guy was an undrafted free agent out of the University of Louisville in 2018 by the Carolina Panthers and was on their practice squad last season. And the reason why I think this guy has a very good chance of making the roster, and why I would be shocked if he didn't make the roster, is because this guy can line up at receiver and has very good hands, and he's versatile. And when you have a guy like a Chris McCaffrey, when he needs breaks, you want a guy who can give you at least 20% of what Chris McCaffrey can give you. And this guy can do exactly that. He has good hands. He'll line up and play wide receiver as well. Also, it's a pretty solid halfback as well. So the versatility that he brings to this Carolina Panthers offense, he really could complement Christian McCaffrey really, really well. And that's why I think he has a very good chance of making the roster. And that's a big reason why I believe that they put him on the practice squad last season, because they see that, and he could really complement Christian McCaffrey really well because of how good of a receiving back that he is, not just out of the backfield, but the fact that he can line up at receiver as well and make plays that way. So this is it for this video. Let me know what you guys think about it down in the comment section down below. What halfbacks do you feel will make the roster for the Carolina Panthers in 2019? Also, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more NFL videos and content. And thanks for watching.